Everyone expected a standard hearing until Jasmine Crockett calmly revealed documents that left Greene visibly panicked, defensive, and exposed in front of millions. There was something different in the air that morning on Capitol Hill. The kind of tension you couldn't quite put your finger on, but you could feel it in the eyes of the aides, in the shifting of chairs, in the way Rep. Jasmine Crockett straightened the edges of her documents as she waited for her turn to speak. C-SPAN was streaming phones, were ready reporters in the back. Rows were scribbling early notes, mostly expecting another rinse. In repeat hearing, but Jasmine had come prepared for something else entirely. She adjusted her glasses, took a slow breath, and leaned toward the mic. The room grew quiet. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice calm but clear. "I'd like to address what I believe is a serious misuse of public trust by a member of this chamber." The room shifted, heads turned, cameras zoomed in. She didn't flinch. "I'm referring to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and a series of financial inconsistencies that I believe merit public examination," she continued, "starting with campaign funds redirected to private interests under the names of two Georgia-based shell entities." A murmur rolled across the room. Marjorie leaned forward, eyes locked on Jasmine. Her hands, folded at first, began to tense. "You've got nothing but air." Greene shot across the table. Jasmine didn't blink. "I have records, not rumors," she replied, holding up a thin file. "And I'd appreciate it if I could finish without interruption." The chair tapped his gavel order. "Let the representative continue." Jasmine pressed on, flipping the first page. According Liegerd to FEC records nearly $130,000. Campaign funds were directed to a consulting firm called Oak Star Strategies, which doesn't even have a physical address, she added, pausing just long enough to let that settle. Greene shifted in her seat. "That's a legitimate firm, and you know it." "No, I don't know it," Jasmine said, glancing briefly toward Greene, because after 3 calls, 2 dead phone lines, and a Freedom of Information request, I still can't find a human being tied to it. That was the moment everything changed. Staffers looked at each other. One of them, young, nervous, mid-20 seconds, began typing into their tablet at lightning speed behind the dais. A camera operator whispered something to his colleague, and then the tweet started. Jasmine could feel it, but she didn't let up. "Additionally," she said, turning the next page, "there's a reimbursement request for a trip to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 3 nights, 5-star. Lodging, private flights, labeled as strategy sessions." Greene leaned in, raising her voice. "You're twisting facts. That trip was cleared." "There's nothing. I have flight logs," Marjorie. Jasmine interrupted gently. "Do you want me to read them?" The tension was now thick. Committee members shifted. Awkwardly, someone coughed. Even the chair was watching. Jasmine now, lips pursed, unsure how far this would go. Jasmine looked at the file again but didn't read from it. "Not yet." Instead, she said quietly, "If the American people are funding luxury travel for private deals, they deserve to know. And if someone is lying about how their money is being spent, it's our duty to speak up." Greene snapped, "You're playing politics. This is a witch hunt, then you shouldn't be scared of the truth." Jasmine said, cool as ice, "You could almost—" I hear the energy shift in the room. This wasn't political theater anymore. This was a collision, and the mic was still live. But the next page Jasmine turned to would make everything that just happened look like a warm-up. The air was already charged. But the second Jasmine turned that next page, it felt like someone lit a match in a gas-filled room. She didn't speak right away. She let the silence do some of the talking. Then she looked up and said, "This isn't just about donations or trips. It's about credibility. It's about what people say behind closed doors when I think nobody's watching, and I've got transcripts that—" Word landed hard. Transcripts. Greene's jaw clenched. "Transcripts of what, Jasmine?" She demanded, leaning forward. "Phone call." Jasmine said flatly, one dated March 9th. Last year, another in July, both tied to conversations about funneling PAC money toward personal real estate, one of which was purchased in Flagler Beach, Florida. A low, sharp gasp slipped out from somewhere in the gallery. "You're lying," Greene shot back, voice rising. "This is fiction manufactured." Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She took out a small printout, slid it down the table to the committee clerk, and turned toward the chairman. "For the record, I've submitted this to be added to the official hearing document. These transcripts were vetted. 2 sources verified them before I even agreed to read them aloud." Greene was now visibly fuming. She looked left and right, but nobody jumped in to defend her. No one could. From the back row, a reporter quietly mouthed, "Oh my God," to her colleague. As she reached for her phone, Jasmine continued in the March 9th call. Greene's aide mentions rerouting $20,000 from the Freedom Rising PAC to a private account listed under the name of a Florida-based LLC owned by her brother-in-law. When asked why, the aide responds, quote, "We need it for the beach house. She's got contractors waiting." Dead silent. Not even the chairman tapped his gavel. This time, Greene stood up. "This is slander. I don't even have a brother-in-law." Jasmine held up another page. "His name is Ronald Edgerton, married to your husband's sister. Kendra records show the LLC Bay Rise Investments was founded 2 months before the wire transfer. I've got the Florida State business filing right here." The room didn't just stir. It turned. One of Greene's staffers got up from the side wall and quietly exited. Another grabbed her phone and started typing frantically. Meanwhile, Greene was standing, visibly rattled, pointing at Jasmine. "You're a liar," she spat, "a bold-faced, media-hungry liar." Jasmine raised her eyebrows slightly, but her voice stayed cool. "Then why did the bank flag the wire transfer? Why is there a note about a fraud investigation being opened and then quietly closed 2 weeks later with no public record?" She leaned back slightly, eyes. "A locked on Greene because you thought nobody would look twice. But I did." Cameras were still rolling. The chairman finally spoke up. "We need a 5-minute recess." "No, we don't," Jasmine said. "I'm not done." And just like that, she took back control in July. There's another call, this time with a developer in San Diego, same PAC, same shell company. This time it's a $50,000 consulting fee labeled under security advisement, but the man on the other end of the call confirms they never met, never spoke, and had no contract. The chair's mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to object but couldn't find the word. Jasmine turned to him. "Sir, these aren't accusations. These are documented transactions. We all sit in this room claiming to represent the people, but if we're not willing to investigate our own, what are we really doing here?" She stood up and looked around the room, letting that question hang. Greene had gone quiet. Her face was flushed, her hands no longer fidgeting, now just sat stiff on the table. In the press outside, they were already writing headlines fast. But Jasmine wasn't just exposing corruption, she was setting the stage for a complete. The political storm. The hearing room wasn't the same anymore. It felt tighter, like the oxygen had dropped a few levels. Greene sat back in her chair, arms crossed, lips pressed so tight it looked like she was chewing her rage. She wasn't used to being on the defensive, especially not like this. Not with cameras rolling, not in front of the entire country. Jasmine picked up a thinner file. This time the cover read "Private Travel Disbursements 2021-2023. Let's talk about the trips," she said, looking directly at Greene, the ones labeled as strategic meetings but linked to private donors, real estate brokers, and oddly cryptocurrency investors based out of Scottsdale, Arizona there. It was a new angle, not just PAC money anymore, not just campaign violations, something dirtier, something murkier. Greene shook her head with a slight laugh. "Crypto, are you serious now?" "I am," Jasmine replied, "because I don't think the American people expect their elected officials to be vacationing at the Phoenician on the dime of unregistered lobbyists." While calling it research, she flipped the page. "April 2022, you were flown to Scottsdale on a private jet registration. Number N549 tons W. That plane belongs to a company called Orbit Holdings. The owner, Leonard March, is currently under IRS investigation for international wire fraud." The name landed hard. People in the gallery began whispering again. Phones out, notes scribbled. "You stayed 3 nights in a luxury." "Sweet, I've got the invoice here," Jasmine added, tapping the paper paid in full by Orbit. "Not disclosed on your financial disclosures." Not once. Greene's face twitched. "That's not mine to disclose," she argued. "He offered to stay. I didn't pay for it." "Exactly," Jasmine said, "which is the problem. Accepting unreported gifts from individuals under federal investigation while sitting on the oversight committee isn't just shady, it's unethical, possibly criminal." The chair looked up from his notes. He didn't stop her. Nobody did. Then Jasmine turned the page again. May 2023, Sedona. Another private flight, this one chartered by a group of donors tied to Westbridge Energy, an oil lobbying firm based in Dallas. 2 of those donors had cases pending before the Environmental Affairs Subcommittee that landed. "Even harder." "Stop it," Greene said, voice shaking. "Now you're twisting everything. You know how this works. Members get offers. We make appearances. This is normal." Jasmine raised her hand gently. "It's not the appearance, it's the pattern. The same names keep popping up, same jets, same hotels. And no disclosures, she took a step away from the mic, walking slowly in front of the dais. Her voice softened just slightly, not weak but personal. "Let me ask you something," Congresswoman Jasmine said. Pausing, "Why did you meet with Nicholas Averill, the CEO of Westbridge, 3 weeks after voting against the Clean Water Accountability Act? That vote killed the amendment restricting runoff exemptions for oil firms like his." Greene blinked. "I didn't meet him," she said. "You were photographed with him on the terrace at El Encanto." Jasmine replied calmly it was posted, then deleted a printed screenshot, slid across the table from the clerk there. It was Greene, smiling in sunglasses, sitting beside a man with a whiskey and a badge on his lapel that read Nicholas A. That photo made its way around the room like wildfire. "You didn't know the camera was watching," Jasmine added, "but the internet never forgets." Greene tried to speak, but nothing came. Her mouth opened, then shut twice. She reached for her water and just held it. "Not drinking, Jasmine. Let the moment sit. This isn't about partisanship," she said finally. "It's about trust. You've built a platform on being anti-elite, anti-corruption, anti-established. But what happens when that mask falls off?" No one answered. Greene stayed silent. But the silence didn't stop the noise outside, because word was already spreading faster than anyone in that room could control. Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't known for backing down. She'd built her brand on confrontation, on being louder, more aggressive, more defiant than anyone else. But now, as she sat at the table surrounded by evidence, camera lights, and a stunned committee, her usual fire looked more like flickers. The meltdown began slowly. You could see it in her fingers, first tapping rapidly on the desk, then her eyes darting from face to face, searching for someone to jump in and rescue. But no one did not. This time, then she snapped. "This is a damn ambush," she shouted, standing up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "This entire hearing has turned into a smear job. Where's the due process, huh?" The chairman tried to interject. "Congresswoman Greene, please." "No, I'm not sitting here while some activist in a blazer reads off lies written by God knows who," she barked. Pointing a trembling finger at Jasmine Crockett, the room went dead quiet again. Jasmine, standing still at her podium, slowly raised her eyes. "I've given you names, records, documents, photos, timestamps. Nothing I've presented is speculation. You just don't like the mirror being held up." "You're out of line?" Greene hissed. "No," Jasmine replied. "I'm finally in line, and I'm not moving." The way she said it, controlled, deliberate, wasn't theatrical. It was something much more dangerous. It was believable, honest, the kind of tone that cuts through every screen in America. A staffer tried slipping Greene a note, but she shoved it away. "Why don't you talk about what your donors are doing, huh?" Greene shouted. "Talk about all the dark money behind your campaign, Jasmine. You think you're clean? You think you're some hero? I'm not here to perform," Jasmine answered calmly. "I'm here to ask questions. The public deserves answers too. And every time you scream, every time you deflect, you confirm why those answers matter." The chairman tried again. "Let's restore order to the hearing." But Greene wasn't done. "You want drama? Fine. Here it is," she snapped. "I have nothing to hide, nothing unlike the rest of you, who smile for the cameras and lie behind the scenes." Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "Then explain the third account opened in your name under Atlantic East Solutions, LLC, tied to a short-term rental property in Tampa, which received multiple deposits from PACs after you voted against rental regulation." The words landed like bricks. Greene didn't even reply. Silence. That was the difference now. Earlier she'd barked and clawed. Now, for the first time, she looked unsure, tired, exposed. And the cameras didn't miss a second of it outside the room. The story was already breaking wide open. Cable networks had interrupted programming. The video feed had gone viral before Jasmine even sat back down. People weren't just watching, they were dissecting. Some cheered, others panicked, a few didn't know what to believe. But they couldn't stop watching either way. Inside the hearing room, the meltdown had done more than just reveal. Greene's pressure point, it had shifted momentum. What began as a shouting match was now turning into something closer to an investigation. You could feel the shift in posture from the other committee members. They were no longer just spectators. They were starting to look concerned, really concerned. Jasmine didn't say another word. For the rest of that segment, she didn't need to. She just closed the folder in front of her and quietly reached for a glass of water. While Greene fumed in silence, her anger finally folding into something else, something closer to fear. But fear can make people reckless. And Greene wasn't the type to go down quietly. The hearing recessed 15 minutes early. The gavel came down fast, and committee members shuffled out with tight jaws and unfinished notes. It wasn't just chaos in the room. It was leaking into every hallway, every elevator, every phone line inside the Capitol building. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She stood calmly gathering her folders, ignoring the noise, the side glance, and the three different aides asking her if she'd give a hallway statement. She gave them all the same answer. Not yet in the hallway. Marjorie Taylor Greene was pacing. No cameras, just voices. And she was using hers loudly. You don't let a junior congresswoman come in here and try to smear me. She barked at her aide, a tall man in his 30 seconds with sharp eyes and a tight grip on his phone. This whole thing was a setup. Somebody's behind her. I want names, he nodded quickly. We're trying to get ahead of it. We've got a statement prepped, blaming political weaponization, deep state spin. The usual. Should we release it now or wait for now and tell Tucker I'll do the show tonight? She snapped 10 minutes. No fluff around the corner. Jasmine quietly walked past a cluster of staffers, all of whom paused their whispering when she appeared. She made eye contact with none of them except one. A young black intern, maybe 19 or 20, who gave her a look that wasn't just admiration. It was gratitude. Jasmine offered a brief smile, then kept walking 2 floors up in a quieter hallway. Representative Alan Dorsey, a moderate from Oregon, was already on a call with his chief of staff. We've got a DISTA. Once he said firmly, I don't care what she meant to the base, this is about to go nuclear. You think the files are legit? The voice asked. She read them too smoothly. And that wasn't theater. That was strategy outside the press, was lining up along Independence Avenue. Cameras everywhere, microphones clipped onto lapel. A CNN correspondent rehearsed his hit. As producers counted down from 10, everyone wanted a piece of the story inside a side conference. Greene sat down with her comms director, and one of her lawyers. Her tone was different. Now less fire, more calculation. What's worst case? She asked, eyes fixed on the table. The lawyer, an older man with a salt and pepper beard, cleared his throat. If Crockett's docs are real, and if she pushes for a formal ethics inquiry, we're talking potential censure. Maybe more. The financial stuff alone could snowball. FEC violations, IRS, red flags, even DOJ interest, if they decide to sniff around Greene. Didn't speak, she just stared. What about public support? The comms director asked. We'll keep the base. Greene replied, they don't care about PAC names or plane numbers. They care that I fight. And the lawyer glanced at her. They care until it starts to look like you lie. Meanwhile, in a small office tucked behind the hearing room, Jasmine sat with her chief of staff, sipping cold coffee. You know they're going to say this was a takedown. They'll call you a plant, a puppet. The work's her aide said. Jasmine smiled, but there was a weight behind it. They can say whatever they want, she replied. But when I look people in the eye back home, I'll be able to say one thing with certainty. What's that? I told the truth, and I told it with receipts. But while truth was Jasmine's shield, Greene was already planning her next move, and it wouldn't involve playing by the same rules. By the time the hearing resumed the next day, the world had changed. It wasn't just a congressional proceeding, it was a spectacle. Satellite trucks lined the streets. Cable news networks had turned their banners red. Headlines: Red light courtroom, drama, Greene, under fire, Crockett drops bombshell. Was it all a lie inside the building? The committee room was full an hour early. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder, fingers flying over keyboards. Members who rarely showed up on time now arrived early, faces blank, phones in hand. And Jasmine Crockett, she walked in quietly, with a manila folder under her arm and a calmness that unnerved everyone watching. Greene hadn't spoken publicly since the meltdown, but today she wore a sharper suit, fresh makeup, and a new expression. Cold but rehearsed, Jasmine didn't waste time the moment the chair gave her the floor. She stood and said, yesterday I shared receipts tied to campaign violations and unreported gifts. But there's one more document I've waited to verify, and now that I have, I believe the committee and the public, I deserve to see it. She placed the manila folder on the table and opened it with care. This is a draft agreement between Representative Greene and a Nevada-based investment group, Ridge Hill Partners. It stated February 2023, 2 weeks before she introduced legislation. Designed to lower capital gains taxes on private energy holdings. Gasps audible now, even from the committee. Jasmine held up the first page, revealing a bold letterhead with both Greene's name and Ridge Hill's. This document includes language requesting Greene's ongoing advocacy for deregulation in exchange for undisclosed financial equity in a subsidiary, specifically Horizon Aggregate Ventures, a firm with deep holdings in fracking operations across the Midwest. Greene stood up. That's a fake. That's not even my signature. Jasmine didn't flinch. We had it reviewed by an independent forensic analyst. The signature matches 5 separate documents. Filed with the Georgia Secretary of State, Greene's face turned pale from the back. A reporter whispered, "That's game." But Jasmine wasn't finished. The deal never went public, and the legislation she introduced didn't pass. But that doesn't change what this is. An agreement to trade influence for personal gain. Silence. Not the kind that feels respectful, the kind that settles in because no one knows what to say next. One of Greene's attorneys whispered something in her ear. She pulled back, visibly shaken. "You don't know what you're doing," Greene muttered, her voice cracking. "You're burning the whole house down for what?" "A headline, no," Jasmine said calmly, "for accountability." The chairman leaned in. "Representative Crockett, are you formally requesting that this document be submitted to the House Ethics Committee?" Jasmine nodded yes, along with the full binder of accompanying records which have been uploaded to a PeopleSys secure congressional server and made available to all committee members. The clerk walked over and collected the folder. A camera shutter snapped outside. People watching live were already reacting. Comments flooded in by the thousands. Even conservative voices on TV struggled to defend Greene. Without sounding ridiculous, back inside, Greene sat down slowly. Her hands didn't move. Her face didn't change because something had shifted in her. Now, not just frustration, not just fury. It was the realization that this wasn't just about a hearing anymore. It was a legal threat, a career threat, and the worst part, she didn't know what else. Jasmine had in her file, but Jasmine had made her point, and now the real question was whether the system would act or simply watch. By mid-afternoon, the headlines were unavoidable. It didn't matter what channel you flipped to: MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, even local affiliates in cities like Tulsa, Boise, Fresno were covering it. People weren't just watching clips from the hearing. They were arguing in diners, whispering at church, debating at office, lunch tables. Social media exploded. Hashtags surged. Crocker exposes Greene Packgate and had a Greene collapse, all trended within minutes of each other on YouTube. The hearing clip crossed 2 million views in 4 hours. Someone posted a 10-second snippet of Greene slamming her hands on the desk, captioned, "When receipts hit harder than opinions." It went viral instantly in Shreveport, Louisiana. A barbershop had the TV tuned in. Curtis, the owner, paused mid-cut just to say, "Man, she cooked her on live TV." That ain't politics. That's surgery. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 2 retired teachers who'd voted conservative their entire lives sat at a diner watching the coverage on a small screen above the register. "She looked guilty," one said flatly. "Didn't even try to deny it. After that last document, she tried yelling." The other replied, "Didn't work this time." It was that kind of moment, the kind that skips over the usual media filter and goes straight to people's guts. Something felt real about it. It didn't matter where you stood politically. Greene's unraveling wasn't just a story, it was a moment. And Jasmine, she became a household name. Overnight, clips of her composure circulated like wildfire. One tweet read, "If Grace Under Fire had a face, it'd be Jasmine Crockett." A TikTok remix turned her, quote, "I told the truth. And I told it with receipts," into a chorus over a bass beat. Teenagers who didn't even know what a House hearing was were suddenly quoting her in video. Cable news couldn't keep up. Some anchors tried to spin it as partisan warfare, but viewers weren't buying it. The evidence was too specific, the documentation too solid, and the silence from Greene's camp defining even among Greene's most loyal followers. Cracks were starting to show. At a town hall in Grand Junction, Colorado, a woman wearing a green 2022 hoodie stood up and asked a question. Her local congressman wasn't ready for. "Why aren't y'all talking about the PAC money? If it was fake, she'd say it loud." "She ain't said nothing." Talk radio lit up with callers. Some defended Greene, others didn't. "She fought for us. But now it looks like she fought for herself too," said one caller from Wichita. Online right-wing influencers hesitated. A few tried to discredit Jasmine, digging up old clips, old tweets, but none of it stuck. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't taken cheap shots. She'd presented documents and stood her ground. The attacks bounced off her like rubber bullets. Meanwhile, congressional offices were swamped with calls, some demanding Greene resign, others demanding an investigation. A few just wanted clarity. The Speaker's office declined to comment, but insiders leaked that a quiet conversation had already taken place behind closed doors. There were whispers of potential censure, maybe more. And through it all, Jasmine stayed quiet. No press tour, no grandstanding, just a short post on her congressional site thanking constituents for their support and affirming her commitment to transparency. That silence spoke louder than a dozen interviews. Because while Greene's team scrambled to clean up the wreckage, Jasmine didn't have to say another word. The public was already writing the story for her, but the louder the reaction got, the more pressure mounted for someone in power to actually do something about it by the third day. Greene's office resembled more of a bunker than a workspace. Blinds closed, phones ringing, nonstop staffers whispering in corners. Her chief of staff, red-eyed and running on fumes, stood by the copier, punching buttons like the machine owed him money. Is she coming in? One aide asked quietly. She's still in the conference room. Another replied on the phone with legal. Inside that room, Marjorie Taylor Greene sat hunched over a speakerphone surrounded by documents half deboned, drunk coffee, and three people who looked as tired as she did. She's not backing down, said her attorney. She's holding the line and she's doing it smart. No leaks, no sound bites, just evidence that's dangerous. So what do I do? Greene asked, rubbing her forehead. You don't resign the EPI, lawyer said, but you also don't go live again every time. You speak, you bleed. We need a statement, written carefully. Greene shook her head. I don't do careful, you do now, he said bluntly in the Capitol cafeteria. Two aides from different offices traded glances over lunch trays. She was always loud, one said, but now she's quiet. That's how you know it's real. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's team fielded calls from journalists, elected officials, even former members of Congress. Some offered congratulations, others support. A few were careful not to say too much, just in case the tide shifted again. But Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't take a victory lap. She went back to her district office that Friday and sat in on a housing complaint meeting with a group of senior residents in Dallas. You're not tired? Her aide asked quietly after. I'm always tired, she said, smiling faintly, but I'm not done back in Washington. Things moved fast. A bipartisan group within the House committee began reviewing the doc. Crockett submitted it wasn't a formal investigation. Not yet, but it was the first step. The kind of step that usually takes months this time. It took days one by one. Greene's allies started pulling back. Some gave vague statements about letting the process play out. Others flat out dodged. Reporters only the fringe remained loud, shouting conspiracy online, calling Jasmine a plant, calling the documents forged, even though none had been disproved. By the following week, 3 Republican members quietly requested an internal ethics review be opened. A move like that wasn't small. It meant Greene's own party was no longer willing to defend her. Blindly, she released a written statement 2 days later, new apology, new acknowledgement, just an accusation that Jasmine Crockett was weaponizing the process to smear true patriots. But by then, the narrative had already shifted. Editorial boards across the country wrote columns about transparency, about accountability, about the importance of character. And in Greene's own district, a local poll showed her approval rating had dropped 20 points in 7 days. 20 points at a Rotary Club in Macon, Georgia. A former donor stood up and told the room, I don't care what letter's next to your name, if you lie to the people and get caught, you shouldn't represent them. The fallout. It wasn't just political, it was personal. Staffers considered jumping ship. Donors stopped answering calls. Lobbyists suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett stayed focused. She kept working, kept answering emails. She hadn't destroyed her opponent through insults or games. She'd done it with paperwork, with poise, with facts, and the country noticed. But the real test wasn't what happened to Greene. It was what Congress and the voters would do next. By the end of the month, the headlines had begun to shift. The frenzy quieted, but the questions hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown sharper, clearer. Voters across the country had seen something rare, evidence delivered with discipline, without theatrics, and without walking anything back. For once, a political moment had felt honest in interviews. People from coast to coast kept repeating the same thing. She didn't yell, she didn't insult. She just showed the proof at a community center in Akron, Ohio. A pastor told his congregation during a Sunday service, integrity is quiet, loud. Doesn't always mean right. And the truth, it doesn't need to shout. Jasmine Crockett wasn't interested in becoming a media darling. She hadn't hired a new publicist. She didn't go on every show that invited her. Instead, she chose a sit-down with a local journalist in Dallas. The interview was calm, focused. Did you want this to be a takedown? The reporter asked. No, Jasmine said plainly. I wanted people to see what happens when you follow the trail. I wanted them to understand that real power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from being prepared. The journalist nodded. Are you worried about retaliation? I'm aware of it, but I'm not worried. I didn't do this to win a fight. I did it because people deserve better than smoke and mirrors. That phrase stuck in Washington. The House Ethics Committee opened a formal inquiry into Greene's campaign finance. It was a quiet move, but a powerful one. No press conference, just a simple notice that her records were under review for Greene. The storm didn't pass. It just moved indoors. Legal consultants, staff, turnover, travel cutbacks. Once a staple on every evening panel, she now declined. Interviews, no more press-ready sound bites, just silence and strategy. And for Jasmine, the recognition kept growing. She was invited to speak at universities. Georgetown, Howard U. C. Berkeley. Not as a hero, but as a voice of reason. She always gave the same message. Don't confuse loud with right, do your homework, and never walk into a room afraid of the facts. High school students sent her letters. Young women wrote about seeing someone who looked like them stand up with a binder and take down a lie. Voters said they felt seen, like someone had finally said out loud what they'd been thinking for years, that politics doesn't have to be a circus, and maybe, just maybe, truth still matters. One evening, Jasmine was asked to speak at a town hall in Garland, Texas. It was packed, standing room only. No campaign signs, no slogans, just residents, black, white, Latino, young and old, waiting to hear from the person who'd gone toe-to-toe with one of the loudest voices in Congress, and never flinched. She stepped up to the mic and looked out at the room. I'm not here to talk about scandals or headlines, she said. I'm here to talk about what comes next, because what happened in that hearing room wasn't about one person. It was about what we allow in our politics and whether we still care enough to stop and ask, is this honest? Is this fair? Is this who we want to be? She let the silence sit, then added power. Without truth is just noise. And we've had enough noise. The room erupted, not in rage or chaos, but in applause. A slow, steady rise that came from people who finally felt like someone was speaking their language. That night, back at home, Jasmine sat alone at her kitchen table. The binder from the hearing still in her bag. She hadn't opened it since she didn't need to. She knew what it said, and more importantly now, so did everyone else. Because the truth, when spoken clearly and without fear, doesn't just win argument. It shifts the culture. If this story moved, you share it with someone who still believes in facts, honesty, and holding the powerful accountable. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter.